Hey class, this is Mr. Pritz. We are going to take a brief look at the book of Moses before we jump into the individual books in class. We need to get our head around the book of Moses as a whole. So the book of Moses is made up of the first 5 books of the Bible, which is also known as the Pentateuch. That's the Greek word for 5 books. Moses is the author of this book of books and wrote it under the inspiration and guidance of God. From this story, this beginning story of the Bible, come all other stories. Every story you read, any good story at least, you can see the same themes, the same design woven into all other stories. And that comes from these beginning stories in the Bible. This book is the beginning of the greatest story ever told, in which the gospel is the climax and the return of Jesus the finale. This book contains the story of the beginning of God, the universe, humanity, and the nation of Israel. This book is foundational for our understanding of who God is. There may not be a better book than the book of Genesis to really explain to us who God is and how God wants to relate to his people. This book is also foundational for our understanding of the rest of the Bible. What we will notice really early on when we start studying the Pentateuch is that the design patterns that are woven into the Pentateuch are woven into almost every other book in the Bible. So if we can get a foundational understanding of the Pentateuch, we will already have a better understanding of the rest of the Bible. This is the beginning of the story of God and man. This is the beginning of a real story that we are all now spectators to and participants in. The Bible is the one unique book that we are not only spectators to and when we're reading it, but also participants in that the conclusion of the story has not happened yet. Jesus has not returned yet. But we know in reading the Bible that we are awaiting his return. We are awaiting the redemption of the world, the redemption of all things through Jesus Christ. So let's look at the structure of the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch begins with the book of Genesis, which tells the story of the beginning of the universe and the family or people of God called Israel. So the book of Genesis takes up a good chunk of the Pentateuch. It also spans the most time. The next 4 books, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, tell the story of the forming of the nation of Israel and the giving of the divine law as the heroic character Moses leads Israel on an adventurous journey from Egypt through the wilderness and to the edge of the promised land, which was promised by God. The Pentateuch has lots of literary forms. Some of those key literary forms are narrative, epic, ancestral epic, hero story, law-giving, travel story, and oration or speech. So if we can get an understanding of these literary forms, we will have a more enriching and delightful read of the Bible because we will actually understand the form by which the writer is writing these stories. So some tips on how to read the Pentateuch. First, the Pentateuch should be read and understood as a book written by one author, and that author being Moses. Moses had an intention in writing this book, and we will discover his intention as we study this book together. Every author of every book has an intention, and if you can discover the author's intention, the book will make more sense and it will actually come alive to you. And so that's what we're going to do as we study the Pentateuch. We're going to try to discover what the intention of Moses was when he was writing this book. We must take on an ancient imagination. You're going to hear that a lot in this class. Taking on an ancient imagination. These books were written thousands of years ago, and they've been passed down from generation to generation. And so we, as a 21st century person living in Western North Carolina, are going to have a completely different worldview as those in these stories. So we must take on an ancient imagination in order to have a better understanding of what is happening in these stories. Keep an eye out for themes. Look for themes. Remember, these authors wrote with an intention and a design pattern in mind. And so if we can find these themes, they're like little keys that unlock aspects of these stories that will again make the Bible come alive to us. And pay attention to characters. The Bible is filled with amazing, elaborate characters. And we're going to look at a lot of different characters in the book of Genesis, and then through the rest of the books, we will be charting out Moses as the central character and the hero in that story. And finally, some questions to ask while you're reading. What did the author intend to say? What did the audience expect the author to say? What did the events the author recorded mean to the author? What is the significance of what the author is recording? And we must always ask, what did it mean, before we ask, what does it mean? Okay? We must always ask, what did it mean, before we ask, what does it mean? All right, so that is a brief introduction. We will get into the book of Genesis in class.